Hey, are you tired of this pandemic thing that 4 years after it started is still killing about a 9/11's worth of Americans every couple of weeks? Well, have I got great news for you on how you might be able to deal with this problem. It's called Just Fucking Ignore It. Just get sick. give it give it to somebody else who's immunocompromised. Just let them die. It doesn't just give up. Let's just give up. I mean, yeah, like a lot of people just started out like that, but it's never too late for you to start giving up. No time like the present to give up. It's been a minute since I've talked about COVID-19, so let's just do a quick catch up. Yeah, a lot of people are still dying from it. It is mostly older people and immunocompromised people who end up hospitalized or dead from this. And yeah, we should still care because those people are people. And, if you get lucky, maybe one day you'll be an older person too. And wouldn't it be nice if you helped build a society that gives a shit about older people by the time you become one? I don't know. It's just a little thought I had. I occasionally get questions from viewers asking if I am still taking precautions against COVID. So let me just state for the record, yes, I am. I'm flexible based on what the current caseloads look like wherever I am. In general, I pretty much always wear a mask on public transportation and when I go to places like the grocery store. And in general, I avoid eating and drinking indoors at restaurants and bars and other public spaces. And I don't know, thanks to all of that and a little bit of luck, I still have not, to my knowledge, contracted COVID-19. Thanks to never contracting COVID-19 or even testing positive for it ever, I had no idea what the current guidelines were for what I would be expected to do if I were to contract the disease. So I was really interested to read this recent news that insiders at the Center for Disease Control, the CDC here in the United States, were telling the Washington Post that the organization is planning to remove their recommendation that people try to quarantine for at least 5 days after testing positive for COVID-19. And this article is wild, absolutely wild. So I wanted to talk to you about it just to share some frustrations. First of all, though, I do want to mention this all comes from leaks from the CDC. The organization has publicly said they do not currently have plans to change their guidance, but even the articles that are reporting on that are quoting other anonymous insiders who confirm yeah, the CDC is working on removing this guidance. So let's go back to the Washington Post article. Officials said they recognize the need to give the public more practical guidelines for COVID-19, acknowledging that few people are following isolation guidance that hasn't been updated since December 2021. This is just an incredible sentence. It packs several layers of fuckery into a relatively small package. For a start, December of 2021 was more than 3 years ago. The United States' national public health organization that is responsible for protecting us from diseases has not bothered to update its guidance on how we should survive a worldwide pandemic in 3 years. 300,000 Americans have died since the last time the CDC gave us suggestions on how not to die from COVID. I mean, I'm sure they have a good reason. They were probably busy with other stuff like, I don't know, curing cancer and or heart disease, the only two things that are killing Americans faster than COVID. Maybe they've made good progress on those. Anyway, back to that incredible sentence. It suggests that the main reason for the CDC dropping the recommendation to isolate is not because isolating doesn't help stop the spread of COVID. It's merely because fewer people are following the guidance anyway. Awesome. It's like When I was a kid and my parents told me and my brothers that we should absolutely not drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes, and then they just left on a 2-year-long round the world trip without us, leaving no guardian in charge and no money or any other guidance. And when they came back and they found that we hadn't followed the rules that they had left, they changed the rules. They said, okay, no more rules. And that's why me and my brothers are meth addicts today. And it's 100% our fault. This is purely individual responsibility. We were not in any way failed by the people whose job it was to protect and guide us. What I found most nuts about this Washington Post article and the others on the topic are the number of experts that they found willing to go on record to support the dropping of the quarantine recommendation, like Michael T. Osterholm, an infectious disease expert at the University of Minnesota, who threw his hands in the air and said, "In making recommendations to the public today, we have to try to get the most out of what people are willing to do. You can be absolutely right in the science and yet accomplish nothing because no one will listen to you." Have you ever stood at an intersection with a stop sign and watched as cars pull up to the stop sign and then proceed through the intersection when it's empty? If you do, you may be surprised to note that if the intersection is completely empty, not a single car will actually come to a complete stop before proceeding through the intersection. They just kind of slowly roll through the intersection. And so I'm wondering why we even have that law that you should stop at a stop sign. Nobody's listening anyway. Why don't we just get rid of it? Hell, why do we have any laws about what you can and cannot do in the car? I see people breaking them every single day. I know because I'm a cyclist. I see you on your phones. Let's just get rid of them. If nobody's actually obeying the guidelines of the road, according to the CDC, this means, and, according to Michael T. Osterholm, infectious disease expert at the University of Minnesota, this means we should just get rid of those laws, regardless of what the science tells us about how many lives they might save if people actually follow them. Who cares? If nobody's going to follow them, let's just get rid of them. I mean, it's not worth considering why people might be ignoring certain rules or regulations. Like, why? Why would people not be willing to listen to what the CDC said 3 years ago about what to do? Why would we not listen to those recommendations that were established, by the way, because billionaire business owners wanted to get the economy back up and running? And so the CDC already changed their recommendations to be more lax in order to prioritize those businesses and not to prioritize public health. As the Washington Post mentions, back in December of 2021, health officials cut the recommended isolation period for people with asymptomatic coronavirus from 10 days to 5 because they worried essential services would be hobbled as the highly transmissible Omicron variant sent infections surging. The decision was hailed by business groups and slammed by some union leaders and health experts. It's impressive that in that section, they admit that it was business groups in favor of looser restrictions and health experts who were against those. But when it comes time to drop the restrictions altogether, they managed to dig up at least one health expert who agreed with it. I found another one over on NBC's article where they point out that despite the fact that COVID has not become any less contagious or deadly, Dr. William Schaffner, an infectious diseases expert at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee, said he and his colleagues have privately encouraged the CDC to drop the 5-day isolation period, in part because there's little evidence it's stopping the spread of COVID. The rigorous recommendations that are currently in place do not reflect common practice, Schaffner said. It's difficult to demonstrate that strict isolation has had a notable impact on transmission. And now he was a little unclear here, so let me just make what he said clearer. It's obvious, absolutely obvious that strict isolation will prevent the spread of COVID. However, what he means is if people aren't doing it, it doesn't prevent the spread of COVID. Yeah, I found his comments really interesting, especially considering previous interviews that Dr. Schaffner has given concerning COVID-19. Like this interview he gave in November of 2021, where he was asked when he could say the pandemic would be over. He replied,
Yeah, well, the first thing is, John, because you're a professional communicator as well as a physician, we have to understand that language is important. When we say the pandemic is over, we have to make sure the public understands that that does not mean that the virus has disappeared and it's all gone. It means that this initial stage, this horrific stage of intense transmission with consequent illness, is over, and we have this virus under better control. This virus is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. So moving from pandemic to endemic is what you and I are talking about now. And for that, I think we'll have a number of metrics. The first and most important will be clearly hospitalizations across the entire age spectrum. Second will be the proportion of tests that are done that are positive. We want that to be lower than 5%. If it's more than that, it really means this virus is still being transmitted quite readily in the community.
I wanted to see if we had hit those metrics, but of course, he doesn't actually say what level of hospitalizations he would tolerate. Hospitalizations are about the same right now as they were when he gave that interview in November of 2021. But back then in November, we were just about to see a big peak that we did not get this year. So things are definitely not as bad as they were back then. The proportion of tests is a solid metric that he named, lower than 5%. And again, if it's more than that, it really means the virus is still being transmitted quite readily in the community. According to the CDC, the test positivity rate is currently 10%. Double his maximum. But hey, people aren't following the strict recommendations, so we might as well throw it out, right? We have an organization that has experienced almost nonstop public relations fuck-ups for the past 4 years, from announcing that masks were useless and COVID-19 could only be controlled via hand washing, to quietly suggesting actually masks do work, but not really focusing on N95s, and of course, not making N95s available to the greater population or even to essential workers. Of course, failing to protect essential workers in every way, like through decent pay and sick leave and protective gear. And then there was failing to launch an effective campaign to vaccinate as many people as possible. And then there was removing the full and easy coverage for people to get vaccinated or to get the drugs they need to keep them off ventilators, to then establishing a confusing system of booster shots in which no one is encouraged to get them as often as the science suggests, which is approximately every 6 months, and instead barely reminding people that they should consider getting one every year or so if they want. Sorry, I'm not actually shocked that no one is following the CDC's guidance. I'd be more shocked if the average American could even tell you the CDC's current guidance without an hour on a computer with a search engine that doesn't use an AI trained on shitty social media posts. A few weeks ago, I got a cold. I'm not sure how. It's a pretty rare thing for me these days, but I did attend my local zoo's outdoor light festival, and it was infested with children. I'm not sure why they're even allowed at the zoo, but anyway, I got a cold. Tests showed that it wasn't COVID, RSV, or the flu, just a stupid, snotty cold. And let me tell you, it sucked. I was down and out for like a week where I just got nothing done except for complaining and blowing snot out of my face. And then there was like another week of me just flumping around my apartment, just being really tired and miserable. And I was complaining about this to a friend, and she asked me if I was isolating myself from my husband. And I was like, well, no, it's not COVID. And then I thought, the hell is wrong with me? Like, who cares if it isn't COVID? It's something sucky. And I am in the best possible scenario where I can just hang out in the guest bedroom where I can keep my disgusting germs away from the person I love the most in this world after Indy. Because Indy is a person. The CDC insiders and the experts who agree with them that are cited by the media, they're all focused on bringing the COVID guidelines into line with guidelines for other serious respiratory illnesses like flu and RSV. And that is the wrong move. It's going in the wrong direction. We should stop treating all coronaviruses as necessary things everyone just gets several times a year and bravely works through. I used to attend conventions like Comic-Con, and I would always know that I was going to come home with con crud and be out of commission for at least a week. But now I know that there is a better world out there. There's a world where if somebody feels a little sniffly, they wear a cheap and easy to find face mask so they don't get other people sick. I knew early on in this pandemic that I loved not getting the common cold anymore. And so I knew that I was never going to travel on public transportation again without a mask. I now wash my hands more often, after I touch other people or random objects out in the world, not because it's going to stop me from getting COVID, but because it will stop me from getting the thousands of other disgusting bugs that I just accepted as a fact of life before. And sorry, I'm not going to pretend that doing any of that is difficult or weird. There's always an N95 at hand. It takes me half a second to put it on my face before I go into the grocery store. I don't slide my hand down an escalator railing and then touch my face or pick my nose. And, when I'm sick, I stay the hell away from other people. These aren't draconian measures. If the Center for Disease Control actually wanted to control disease in the United States, they would work hard to reestablish trust with the American people, put out timely and clear instructions that prioritize our health instead of the health of businesses. They would make medicine and protective equipment free and easy to access for all people who need them. And they'd advocate for our representatives to establish laws that allow people more flexibility when it comes to working from home, taking sick leave, or getting childcare. In the meantime, yeah, everyone is going to keep ignoring them because why wouldn't we? Anyway, if you care about this at all, if you want to let the CDC know how you feel, I'll include a link down below. You can send them a message. They've probably already made up their minds, who knows, but maybe it'll feel good just to yell at them for a bit. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.